Ownership is a funny thing. I'm reminded of the quote by Carl Sagan. We are the custodians of life's meaning. We are caretakers and custodians. While most of us search for meaning and purpose in life, we can and should be reminded that we're not alone in the struggle of life. That same struggle that generations before us faced, and in so many different yet very similar ways, we find and see that struggle in the construction of our homes. The representation of our individual communities, these homes are the threads and the through lines that bring us back to where we come from, who we are, and who we will yet become. These are the connections that bring us full circle. There's so many things that I discover, and I think we rediscover when we're working on these houses, that people have just forgotten. I mean, there's so many things that we take for granted these days, and the house, in an antique house at that, really shows you what that's all about. I mean, people ask us a lot of times, why do we salvage materials? Why do we move houses? Well, all of this used to be commonplace, right? There's a saying that says, if you don't know your history, you're destined to repeat it. Well, if you do know your history, you're destined to learn from it. You have to think about when we were building this country, when this nation was being created, the houses that we sit in and that we specialize in restoring, they weren't around. The raw materials weren't around. We didn't have any stores. I mean, you have to think about the forest as your store, right? You're thinking as the axe as your scanner, right? The oxen as your shopping cart. You're trying to think of, how do I forge a house and a community out of sheer will, just mental capability, aptitude, and the ability to gather the community together. I mean, how would you have done it then? And these are the things that we don't always realize and we take for granted now. It's easy when you think about it to actually move a house. It's easier than clearing property and trying to come up with the design. You've got a house that's already there with quality materials. But I think it's just what we define as hard today, or what we define as impossible, or what we just don't understand. That's the nature of all these houses. That's what's so fascinating about them. Each and every one of these houses has its own story and is a vital piece of the community. And when you sit down and you start learning about it, or you take it apart and figure out how it goes back together, there's so much you can learn. And once you do, you will never see an antique house in the same way.
When we restore a house, we look at what the house tells us, who the homeowners are and were, what story do we want to connect and carry, and how we can help preserve it. Our influences in how we can conserve and marshal, and that really requires quiet observance so you can understand what you're dealing with before you make any hasty decisions. The materials, the choices, the styles, the eras, we can quite literally pick from hundreds of years of influence from around the world. It's absolutely fascinating. So our process starts with learning more about the client and also learning more about the house. I know that sounds funny, walking through a house and saying, "Hi, nice to meet you," but it is amazing to walk through the home and see a client learn something new that they may have not known before, or even myself learning new elements. It's all about preservation and telling the story of the house, but then also incorporating that in with the client's goals. In this house, I really loved seeing the framing of this was a barn, And so highlight the beam, the post and beam structure that is here, and it was covered up in many layers. And so we uncovered that, and then incorporating the black walnut, another wood element to tie it all together. This black walnut is a 200-year-old slab. We have one of the oldest black walnut trees in the front yard. It just made sense for the design of this farmhouse. And then bringing in some timeless elements like the cast iron sink that we have here and the views of the backyard was just another element to highlight. It's all about really finding out more about what the client wants, their goals, and helping to preserve the house too, tell a story about the house, and incorporate the client's story into the house as well. So we all have stories to tell, and I always think it's interesting to find out the story of the client. Our job is to preserve the stories of the home, but also incorporate the story of the client into each house. This reminds me of the house that we bought in Sandwich called the Deacon Eldred house. That house was very inspiring to me. It was part of my childhood, so the story goes way back for me. And when we got the chance to renovate that house, I just couldn't wait to incorporate some of the stories back in about Arabella Burgess and the Thornton W. Burgess Society, really preserving the house and not changing it too much, adding the modern functions that you need like central AC and a kitchen, but also incorporating the stories so that the tile backsplash in the showers has a little bunny. There's all these delicate little, very subtle nods to Thornton W. Burgess in the house. And I just was so inspired by that. And it was an amazing story for us to be able to restore that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you start to think of the stories and all the different challenges that we've run into as we've restored these various homes. I mean, a lot of the homes that we're working on are 200 and 300 years old. So we're talking houses that go all the way back to a time before the United States was the United States, effectively. But then you think about, you know, the challenges that you run into, right? We're dealing with hundreds of years of history.
Right.
We're dealing with bug damage, with water damage. We're dealing with the people who have really lived in these houses, worked and lived and slept and ate and died in these houses.
Right.
And I can think of certain ones that we have come into, you know, as kind of the savior of that house. And we've delicately had to try to think about how do we put the house back together and how do we disassemble the house or deconstruct it so that we can actually put it back together but still do justice to the story. It's really just poignant for me when we think about bringing these houses back to life. It's not so much about the work that we're doing directly today, it's about the work that centuries and generations of people have done. And that's part of our overreaching goal, is just to try to make sure that these houses and these stories are preserved for generations to come.
Yeah, I'm often inspired by the stories of the house, and I've learned so much over the years on every house that we tackle for clients or ourselves. The inspiration for me really comes through with every design. I learn something new about some kind of textile or material or architecture that was used for that era of the house. And I love teaching that to our clients as well, that this is worth saving. You should highlight this woodwork. It is original. It's also inspiring. And I think I love seeing clients light up when they realize the history of something that's in their house and the story behind it. And that's really what inspires me on all of these designs.
There's a saying I love to think of, and it goes, everything new is forgotten old. And that is the key to our process that brings us full circle.